Epstein was absolutely doing a lot of really shady arms trafficking stuff and financial criminality, and they have no interest in getting deep in the weeds there. Because they can hold it over his head the whole time.
Do you think there are a lot of Epsteins operated?
Well, yeah, my whole book is about how Epstein was not an anomaly. You know, I mentioned the example of Adnan Khashoggi, but I mentioned Robert Keith Gray, who Robert Maxwell hired when he came, to the U.S. And made his big entry into New York City. He was also involved in blackmail stuff. There was a page boy scandal he was related to in the 1980s, where I forget the guy's name. I think Larry Craig was the name of the main congressman or senator involved. And Craig denied all the charges, but then got caught in the early 2000s for soliciting, in a bathroom in an airport or something like that. But there's been a ton of these scandals over the years. And then you have figures like Roy Cohn, who I mentioned earlier, involved in activities as well. There's a lot of these figures.
Sex blackmail seems to become very useful.
Well, it is, because, this is one of those things that's a holdover from the mob that later gets absorbed by intelligence agencies because they see its utility.
So if we see someone rich, famous,
knowing
successful,
knowing information, blackmail information, the CIA, that's the intelligence to them. We want to gather intelligence on these people and then use it to our benefit for national security interests.
Which is all economic.
Well, more often than not,
yeah.
But it's, it's obviously other things too. Just, I think it depends on the circumstance, really.
It's so hard to get your head around it, Whitney.
Well, I've thought about, I understand that my books are like a lot of information, but the thing is, we're never going to get an affidavit from the CIA being like, yes, we did bad things. Like, we've known they've done bad things in various decades. It's been very documented, and they won't admit to bad things there in almost every one of those cases. So it's like, you're not going to get that about Epstein or about anybody else,
So why do you think Epstein became almost like the central figure for all of this corrupt global elite meta cartel?
Well, he's just a microcosm of it, really. But I think
is it his own
he became too exposed, I think, especially after his first arrest. And as he described it, he became radioactive. But he had, before been able to move through all these different circles, with impunity, and was a well-respected guy in these elite circles, right? He was useful to a lot of people, mainly for money things, but also for, other more illegal things from, what we know about the case as it's developed. So I think since then, I don't know, he tried to rebrand as like a tech entrepreneur and all this stuff, but he was allegedly still cultivating important relationships. He was reportedly advising Tesla on how to take Tesla private. He claimed to be advising Treasury on the Department of Treasury on cryptocurrency and anti-hacking efforts. All sorts of, he was still doing a lot of stuff between those arrests. It's just, the public association was, no longer beneficial for a lot of powerful people.
But he was considered financially illiterate.
By who?
Well, I think Eric Weinstein came out and said he's a...
Yeah, that's interesting. Doesn't he work for Teal Capital? Well, Eric, I'm not super familiar with Eric Weinstein's Epstein story, but as I understand it, he talks a lot more about his impressions of Epstein at the meeting as opposed to why he was going there. And I believe he ran a hedge fund at the time. So why would you be going to Epstein as a hedge fund guy? I don't know.
Well, it seems like everybody met with Epstein at one time.
Yeah, for financial stuff. But I do not believe that he was financially illiterate. He was very successful. He would not have been tapped in the 80s by people like Adnan Khashoggi and Douglas Leese if he was not savvy. He helped orchestrate one of the largest Ponzi schemes in U.S. history, Towers Financial, but his name got dropped from the case like 3 months in. So I mean, how do you do that by being financially illiterate?
Well,
Why would Leslie Wexner give you power of attorney over all of his affairs?
Well, that is also very weird, though.
But would he do that for someone who's financially illiterate? Because Epstein had several years between 1987 or 1985, depending on who you believe, when the introduction was made.
But why give it to him anyway?
Well, obviously, Wexner liked Epstein very much. I think there's no questions there. So there's this murder of Wexner's tax attorney.
Yeah.
And then not long after that, Epstein comes into Wexner's world and untangles his tangled finances, whatever that means. And Epstein, during that time, before then, between 1981 and 1985, described himself as a financial bounty hunter. He was hired to find money that had been stolen, and he hid away stolen money for powerful people. He played both sides. And someone who can effectively do that, he was hired by like very fancy, like aristocratic people for those purposes, admittedly. Like a very aristocratic Spanish family being one of them. They would not just hire some financially illiterate idiot to do that kind of stuff for them. And Adnan Khashoggi was one of his clients too. He's not going to hire a financially illiterate guy to do that. I think that is, it's bull, and it's part of this narrative that's been woven about Epstein, about how he was just charismatic and him being good at anything else was just a facade.
So it's a distraction.
Well, yeah, because by that narrative inherently means don't look any deeper into what Epstein was doing, in his early history, for example.
Well, let's talk about that.
Sure.
Is this the arms trafficking?
Yeah, among other things. So,
okay, can we go back further, just for people who don't understand? How did he become a thing? Because wasn't he?
No one really knows, but it all seems to have started with this backpacking trip to Europe in 1971, and this was when he was a college dropout. I think he went to Cooper Union, I think, for a few years, didn't finish, and then was started at NYU in 1971 through 74, but didn't get a degree, something like that. And somewhere in 1971, he went backpacking to Europe, and he was in the UK. And so in the UK, he became close friends with this famous cellist, Jacqueline Dupree, and reportedly, he claimed through her got sort of an in with the royal family at that point. I don't really know if that's true, but he comes back from that backpacking trip and he's hanging out at Jimmy Goldsmith's house. And Jimmy Goldsmith is an interesting figure. If you are a fan of Adam Curtis documentaries, you may remember him from the Mayfair set. He is a currency speculator, or was. He was very close to Robert Maxwell, among other figures. He was a member of this very interesting nexus in Mayfair called the Claremont Club, which was sort of this elite gambling club that a lot of interesting figures were tied to, including figures with intelligence links, organized crime links, and blackmail links. So, for example, if you're familiar with the Profumo affair in UK politics, the nexus responsible for that, which brought down the government of Harold Macmillan, has its nexus at the Claremont Club. And Jimmy Goldsmith was a member of that, along with people that were also very close to Robert Maxwell, like Roland, or Tiny Roland, as he's remembered. And another well-known member is David Sterling, who basically started a lot of this movement, the private mercenary phenomena in Britain, among other things. So definitely a network of powerful people, and a lot of his early Epstein's early high society New York contacts. His earliest ones, a lot of them met him at Jimmy Goldsmith's mansion in New York. How were they connected?